name is Tanaka Mutakwa. I've been working in the software engineering industry for about 12 years now, based in Cape Town in South Africa. My background is started as an engineer for about 6 or 7 years, and then in the last few years, I've been working in sort of engineering leadership roles that still have involved quite a bit of the software engineering aspect, but also a lot about people management and building teams and processes and everything around that. I worked at Allen Gray first. That was my foundational part for 4 years. Then I moved to Prodigy Finance, which was a startup that grew quite a bit, and then to another startup called Names and Faces, and now I work at a company called Hotjar. And at Hotjar, what we do is we are a product insights analytics company. In short, if you buy our product, we'll give you a little script, a JavaScript script that you can add to your code. And with that script will track what your users are doing or customers are doing on your website. And in the Hotjar dashboard, you can view session recordings of every user from your site, what they come and do, like basically mouse movements and everything. You can also view heat maps of where most of your customers and users are spending their time on your website. We also have a survey product, which you can basically send surveys to customers or potential customers and get responses, and a feedback product, which embeds a widget on your site, on any of your pages, and your customers can give you feedback on what they feel about the page, or if they run into an issue, let you know. The whole idea behind the company's existence is to help other companies improve their websites or products by understanding the behavior of their customers on their websites. So while most other analytics products tell you what happened, Hotjar will tell you why it happened, because you can actually visualize it with videos and stuff. I'm the team lead for the integration squad at Hotjar. So all this data that we collect on your site, you often want to send it to your other third-party systems. So for example, the session recordings that you have or the survey responses that are coming in, if you use maybe like Microsoft Teams or Slack, you want to push them out to a channel in those systems, and then everyone in your company can have a look and like use that, or you want to push it to another tool that you use, that like Google Analytics, for example, and combine the data there. That's outgoing integrations. We also build incoming integrations. So if you use an A/B testing tool, for example, and you're running multiple tests, we integrate with a few A/B testing tools, and we bring that data into Hotjar. So in Hotjar, you can filter recordings based on a particular experiment. So you can see, for this experiment, what are people running into and that. So that's the squad I work in. It's been going since that squad started in October, so that we can really focus on building these integrations and embedding and creating more value for customers. Outside of work, I also started the tech leadership community in South Africa. What it is a community of long-running, new and aspiring engineering leads, or people who are interested in technology leadership. We meet once a month. It's a hybrid at the moment, so it's virtual one month, and then the 1 month is in person in Cape Town. It started fully as in person. Then during COVID, we decided not to stop completely, so we went virtual and ended up having people attending from outside of Cape Town. So we've kept it, and it's rotational that way. So if you go to techleadership.co.za, you can see that, and you can follow a link that will take you to our meetup.com page, where you follow announcements of events that are upcoming. It's every first Tuesday of every month. And that tech leadership community also has a tech leadership newsletter that we send out once a month, which is a list of curated links that we found over a month that are useful for people who want to learn about leadership or who are currently working in the leadership space. So we send you like 6 or 7 links of interesting content that can help you learn and grow as a leader. And if you scan the QR code, or if you use Substack, you can just search for tech leadership newsletter and you'll find it there. All right, so when I do these engineering leadership related talks, I often ask, so it's always interesting to know how many people are currently working in the audience, are currently working in an engineering leadership role, like an official one. All right, and how many are and are looking into potentially being a lead one day, so that's why you're here. How many do not fall in those two? All right, cool. And then another question I'm going to ask, which is related to the talk I'm presenting on, is how many people here feel that their team or engineering team that they work in or the engineering team they're leading, when compared to engineering teams across the whole world, would fall in like high-performing engineering team? Like it's one of the top teams in the world. How many people feel that? All right. How many people feel like you're somewhere in the middle, you're doing all right, you could be? How many people feel like they are in the struggling space? Like we're really like far behind. It's a safe space, don't worry. The talk is being recorded. Okay, cool. Thanks. It's all good to know. It's all good to know. Yeah. Because I guess we're going to be covering quite a lot of those topics today. As you know, the title of my talk is Assessing the Performance of Your Engineering Team. And before I jump into it and what we're going to be talking about, I think there are two questions worth answering. One is very quick. Is it possible to measure engineering team performance? And the answer there is yes. Also, I wouldn't be doing this talk. But to be more serious, in a similar theme to the keynote earlier, we're now at a time where it is more possible and much easier to actually get data around how your teams are performing and actually be able to make a better judgment of how our teams are performing than back in the day where it was a bit more difficult and often seen as controversial to try figure out how a team is performing. So yes, it's possible. And why should you measure is also another interesting question. And I think the answer to that is one of the most important answers to that is what's in bold there at the bottom, which is you actually can't improve what you don't measure because you don't know. So that's the one side. But the other side is when you look at engineering teams at companies, they are usually one of the most expensive cost centers. The company is investing a lot of money in paying people's salaries and all their resources, all these MacBooks that everyone's moving around with, offices if you do have. And of course, the company is looking at a return on investment, that the engineering team is going to return a higher value than what they're putting into that team. So it's basically knowing and understanding how the team is performing, given that you're putting money in it, is useful for most companies. And then also trying to figure out what you can improve. And then on the other side, also figuring out what's actually going well, what are we doing well, so that you can keep going well at that. And I think a lot of environments and most places sort of fly blind. There's like a sense of like, oh, we do that well and everything, but it's like we come to work and you go on years and years and years, and you've never actually like figured out like, where do we actually stand? So the whole idea of the talk is a lot of the stuff you may already be doing at your company. Some of the stuff maybe like you're like, oh, that's new, I didn't think of that. I'm not coming out with something that's like completely new. If it's like completely new, then great, you're going to learn a lot. But then hopefully there's one key takeaway you can have. And also maybe just to think about it a bit more explicitly than just it's just happening and you just saw someone created it. So this slide gives away the secret of my talk. If anyone thought that the answer would be one number that you can come to and measure, and that number you can walk away with and say, this is how you measure how well an engineering team is performing, then no, there is no silver bullet like that. The reality is there are multiple aspects and layers that you need to be looking at when you're looking at team performance. And these are the four, in my mind, that cover all areas that an engineering team sort of focuses on. So that's product value, technical quality, process efficiency, and team health and culture. And for the rest of the talk, I'm going to go into each one of those, explain it a little bit more, as in what it means and what it stands for. And then each of my slides sort of have a couple of practices and tools, example practices and tools, because there's like so many tools out there that help you to measure in that area or that you can use. So it's just like more of like, think about this, these are the areas you need to look at, and perhaps some of the tools maybe are tools you want to look at and consider at your company if you're not already using them. Some of them you will sound very similar to something you already have, and as I mentioned, there are many tools out there. So let's jump right into it. Product value. Out of those four, I think this is the most important. And what product value means is the thing we're building, like as a company, the reason the team exists, the actual product we build, is it actually solving customers' problems? Is it making customers' lives easier? Is it making them more efficient at something? Is it making them make money? Like the reason the company exists or the team exists, the thing they're building, is it actually working? Are we actually achieving that? And why I say it's the most important is, we're going to go into all the other ones, but if you get them all right and your team is the best at all the other ones, and you're getting this one wrong, you're basically building something that no one wants, but it's really built in a great way. So when it comes to product value, how do you actually know? How many of us actually know that like the features we released like 4 or 5 months ago are actually like valuable, are actually working? Because the risk we often have in like the software industry is like we measure success based on like how much we're building. So you build a feature, you do it well, and then next week you're building another one, and then at the end you're like, how well is this team doing? We're like, oh well, we built 10 features, we're doing really well. But then maybe of those 10 features, one of them is really getting used quite a lot, and the rest are like maybe like 10% of your customers really like it. One of them is buggy and everything. So that's actually not the way you want to measure. You don't want to measure output, you want to measure outcome. And how do you achieve some of that? How do you look at product value and measure it? So yeah, I'll jump around into tools and like practices and things like that. So Amplitude and Mixpanel are like very similar tools. There's many others out there. Some people do it manually in their own environment. Some people have rolled out their own tools. But essentially, what you're using them for is to track like events as they happen on your website, for example, or your mobile app or anything. So you can track almost anything. You're like, okay, someone visited this page, someone filled in, let's say it's a sign-up page, someone filled in their username, someone failed to fill in their password or failed the password rules, someone submitted or clicked the sign-up page, and basically you want to track as much as you can about the usage of your product, and that's going to give you insights. Those events, when you start looking at them, will give you insights into what's actually happening. For example, if it's a sign-up page, if for some reason people keep failing at your password rule, it's either something about, it could be broken, like maybe the actual validation is not aligning with what you've put in the text as a rule, or it could be too complicated. They might not be understanding it. It could be the usability in terms of the color. They're not able to read the actual text of like what the rules are when the validation message is coming on, or the message is not coming on. Like there's many things that you start to get from that. But also you can actually also start figuring out like how many people are signing up a day. Maybe you've just rolled out a new sign-up page that was different to a previous one, and previously you were getting 100 sign-ups per day, and now you can see, oh, we're getting like 140, so there's a general trend going up. So it's figure out what tools you want to use. Mixpanel is probably one of the biggest ones and most well-known ones, but figure out what tools you want to use to track everything that's happening within the features that you release. And the way I would advise doing this is, as you're building a feature, it's not, because often tracking is an afterthought. Oh, we released that, when are we going to add the tracking? But you've already gone to production and it's out for a few days or weeks. Tracking should be part of the build as you're going. So as you're thinking, to make the feature complete, it needs to go live with tracking on from the onset. You can, of course, always add new events if you realize, oh, we could have tracked that and we missed it. But you ideally want to think about it from the onset and measure it and have almost like a hypothesis of what we're trying to aim for and see after a few weeks, did we get there? And if we didn't, do we need to go make changes? Or do we need to even retire the whole feature we built because it's got no point? And then other things to potentially look at. So, of course, self-plug there with Hotjar. Again, Hotjar, and like very different slightly to what the tool I just explained, where you're tracking events and everything, is you can actually then just go and see what users are actually doing. So view the session recordings and the videos and actually see where problems are coming across and what people do when they come on your site. So you're tracking the events, you're also tracking behavior on the site. And then you've also got tools such as like NPS, which is quite common. I think almost everyone knows it, perhaps more from a consumer side, where you've been asked to fill in a little survey of would you like recommend this product to someone or not on a scale of 0 to 10. And you can use that to sort of get an idea of like, if you're doing it per feature, where do your features sort of range, or how are people feeling about what you just released, and how can you move it to make it better, or are you already in a good place? And then there's also qualitative stuff you can do, like customer interviews. If you're privileged to be working at a company where you've got like thousands or millions of customers, you'll probably have a cohort of friendly customers who you often, like your product managers or your marketing people, can email and get feedback directly, jump on a call for like 30 minutes and just let you know what they're feeling about the product. Because sometimes you also learn different things than just what numbers and screen recordings are giving you. In a similar way, reviews, you can, if you have a way in which like people are reviewing, if it's a mobile app, maybe you're getting reviews on the App Store, and you can read those reviews and they give you a bit more qualitative issues. And then active users and revenue are sort of more lagging examples of lagging metrics. There are others that are often that you can also use, but these are examples of like metrics you can look at, and they give you an indication of like, well, if you're a subscription service, for example, if your revenue is generally trending up, then you must have something going right with your product, and your product's value is going up. Or if you're active users, if it's a service like a social media site or something, then if your active users are going up, then that's a positive trend, which means the product is providing value. So you can also look at all those things. Going to move to the next one. So in a similar theme again, just like a whole bunch of tools and practices, but to step back a bit, technical quality. So technical quality, I think, speaks for itself. This is like the solutions the engineering teams or team is building. Where would you rate them in terms of like their quality? Like, because this is also important, because the better the quality of the engineering, the more likely the features are going to be have less bugs and cause less problems for customers. But also internally, your engineers are probably going to be in a happier space if the engineering quality is better, because they feel they build great things, but also they're not always like in bug fighting mode, like working very late hours fixing issues, and always like reverting changes and having to redo stuff. So there's lots of benefits to the technical quality aspect. And again, a few example tools, so like Bugsnag and Sentry, there's so many. I think every framework or every language you work in has something of this sort that allows you to track when a bug or an exception is thrown in your systems and report back to you. And you can look at those tools and see the trends too, which is the important part. Is like, well, in the last month we had like way less errors. The errors seem to be increasing. What's going on? What has changed? What is our quality just generally trending down? But also to help you respond quickly and early. And Datadog, which has obviously become very big over the years now, allows you to track your application performance and metrics, and you can look at things like how much memory is getting used by your systems, how much CPU cycles, how long are requests taking to process for a particular down to function level, or if it's an API on an API level. And you also want to see those trends, like our API is becoming slower over time. Maybe like there's something with our performance quality going down, and things like that. And then you can also embed static analysis tools. Quite a lot of teams have this from the development level, like before even someone checks in and pushes up an MR or a pull request. And it will let them know that, well, maybe this code is becoming a bit more complex if you write it this way. Maybe you can simplify it. But it can also be part of your build and report back as when the build completes to say the quality of the code has shifted from some use like A, B, C going down as you're going. And you also want to look at those trends over time to see what are these tools reporting back at us. I'll come back to change failure rate because it's aligned with the other DORA metrics that are in the next slide. And I guess if you were at Phil's talk, you're getting to hear this twice, so double the value. Test coverage, I think, also speaks for itself. How well is our code covered? I think there's the usual caveat, which I think everyone gets these days around more coverage doesn't necessarily always mean quality, but it is a good indicator. Your goal is not necessarily to have 100% test coverage. You want to have good tests, testing the right places. But of course, if you're building more and your test coverage is reducing, it's probably pointing out at like maybe skipping some quality checks here and there. And SLOs, a concept that service level objectives, a concept that was really pushed by Google Datadog has it embedded as a feature. You can view them as almost agreements that a team commits to meeting. So you can say when you build, let's say you build a new API, you can say, we're going to commit to the latency for every endpoint on this API being under 100 milliseconds, 99.9% of the time. The errors, we're going to make sure availability of the API is going to be 99.9%. So as soon as as those things get breached, then Datadog will quickly notify you and let you know. But also you want to look at that again from a trend perspective. How often are we breaking those SLOs? Those are up to you, you decide. But how often are we breaking them and where are they trending towards? It also gives you a bit of a quality gauge. I said I'll come back to change fail rate. It came out of the change fail rate is part of the DORA metrics, which again came out of a research project that Google ran, where they wanted to figure out what makes the top performing software engineering teams in the world. And what they did is they researched thousands and thousands of teams and ended up coming with 4 metrics that you can go into any team, look at and measure. And once you understand them, you can see where a team falls between, when they started, I think it was elite, high, medium, and low rating. Change fail rate is one of them. The other 3 are in the next section. Change fail rate falls here because it does talk a bit more about technical quality. And change fail rate is simply every change we release to production. How often, when we release changes to production, how often do they fail as a percentage? So if you release 100 changes to production, if 15 fail, then your change fail rate is 15%. You want to measure that because, of course, if it's trending higher, it means like every time you're releasing, something is wrong with your quality again. And out of interest from the DORA metrics, the elite or high teams are supposed to fall between 0 and 15%. And it might be interesting why they even allow a range of that 0 to 15%. It's to also enable teams to be able to take risks and be experimental, because if you are going to, as I think Phil said in his last talk too, if you're sticking on 0, if literally your change fail rate is 0, it probably means your team is not pushing the boundaries enough and like not taking a few more risks and working fast enough and not experimenting with being better. So you will have changes. There's nothing wrong with having incidents in production, but then there's something wrong with it generally trending higher and higher and going past that 15% where it slows down your team. All right. Then the next one is around process efficiency, which when you look at that is about how does our team work together? Like, are we working in efficient ways? Or how are we, the ways of working within the team, are they helping to enable us to be as efficient as possible? So this is where I've pulled in the other 3 DORA metrics because they are very much related to that. Cycle time, it's measured in different ways in different places. A lot of tools and teams have now come to a space where they look at cycle time as your average time between when a ticket or a task gets moved, like to get started work done, until you release it into production. It's also, some people look at it more from a lead time perspective, makes it a bit trickier to measure, is from when we started working on the feature itself, so even outside of development, like from the product managers and everyone, till they got it out, which is also still useful to measure. But a lot of teams from the engineering perspective, you're literally looking only at the engineering side, you're looking at, most people use a tool like Jira or Asana or something. When a developer comes in and picks up and moves a ticket to in progress, until they move it to done. That window, you calculate the average of all the tasks that go in for a particular time, and you can look at how long it's taking your team to complete their tasks. You obviously want that cycle to be as short as possible. Ideally, like under a day if you can even, because then that means you're like releasing value to customers very often. Whereas if it's taking like 30 days for an engineer to be working on a task, it means when they pick up something, it takes them 30 days to get it out. And then mean time to restore is when your system breaks in production, how long does it take you to bring it back to a stable state? So an incident occurred, someone's made changes to the backend login code, then all of a sudden there's a report that, okay, people can't log in. From that time that you know that people can't log in till people can log in again, the average of the times you have issues like that and how long it takes you to restore them is your mean time to restore. And again, this is important because it's like how disruptive are we to our customers and how efficient are our processes in getting us back to a stable state. The interesting thing about this is a lot of people would think that getting yourself to fixing some issues requires actually, like if someone's created the bug, then going to fix whatever they were trying to create and moving forward. But sometimes it's actually okay. It's actually okay to get the system back into a stable state by just reverting the change that happened. It may be quicker to get you in a restored state. Then you work back to what they were trying to fix, rather than spending maybe 3 days with struggling to make the change and fix it. So it's okay to just revert and restore, and then you restart from there because now customers have been sorted. And then the last one is deployment frequency, which again, the term sort of speaks for itself, is how often do we deploy changes to production? And that, again, that's in the elite teams, it's pretty multiple times a day. That would be the ideal. How often can we get into production? Linear B, which I've added there, is a tool we use at Hotjar. It allows us to track all these and reports them in a dashboard in one area where you can see it, and per team and per the whole engineering department. If you want, it goes all the way to individual level. I'll chat a bit about individual right at the end, but you can see all these metrics for everyone. So we plug it into Jira. We use Jira for most teams in terms of our processes, and then we plug it into GitLab for our source control, and it pulls all this data plus others. It's got a whole lot of other data, but then the DORA metrics are there, and we can look at them as a team and as a whole engineering org. And then the last one in the 4 is around team health and culture, which is, to describe that, it's how happy are people to work at your company? The engineers that are working for you or that are working at your company, how happy are they to be part of that team and to be coming to work and feel fulfilled and are growing? And there's quite a few things that you can do here, or you should be doing here to measure this and to make sure it's in a good place. So retrospectives are something that most agile teams perform at the end of their cycles, and they can gauge what's going on in the team, what's making people unhappy or what's not working so well, and then hopefully they can improve from there. The usual advice with retrospectives is they're only useful if you actually take action from the issues that are raised. Else it's just a place to come and vent and actually not have any actions coming out of there. So if you have retrospectives, I think ask yourself that question: Do we often action and look back at what we said we would improve? Pulse checks, like a quick survey that you can send out to people. You want to do it frequently, which just I'll use the example. We use 15.5 at Hotjar, so that tool 15.5 has pulse checks in it. Every week, at the end of the week, you get a 15.5 check-in that you need to fill in, and right at the top is a pulse check, which asks you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how was your week? Then it's got really not great at all, and then at the top is best week ever. That's really just the rating, and then if you want, you can leave a comment to say as to why that happened. As an engineering lead, I use that. I look at that on the week, of course, because when I have my one-on-one, I'll be okay, let's chat. If someone puts maybe a 1 or a 2, then we can chat about what happened. But I'm more interested in the overall trend. So if someone was generally a 5, then over a couple months I saw they went to a 4, then they became a 3. Then there's a sign that person might not be getting fulfilled at work and might end up leaving the company, or they might be having some problems at home that obviously are affecting their work. But without that gauge, it's easy to think we know how other people feel, but it's not necessarily that easy when you're working with many people and you're also trying to grow yourself in your own role, because even engineering leads and managers need to also grow. So you've also got so many things going, but just that can give you like, you can look back and maybe have a proper feedback session with the person to say, well, for the last 6 weeks, it looks like things have just been trending down. What's going on? And then one-on-ones are obviously more qualitative, so the actual chats you have with people, they can give you feedback on how someone is going. As usual, recommend one-on-ones if you can every week, at least 30 minutes with each individual in your team if you're a lead. That should give you like a good sense of where they are and how things are progressing with them, and a good measure of how they're doing. And then surveys can be more detailed. So pulse check was just like almost like a little hint of like 0, 1 to 5 scale, but surveys can be more detailed. So 15.5, as I mentioned, does the pulse check, and then gives you also like a surveying tool which allows you to ask people interesting questions. So I'll give you our setup. Our setup is every week you get that pulse check I mentioned. Then underneath you get, since we last spoke, what have been a couple of highlights, and then at the bottom, since our last one-to-one, is there anything that's happened that you need my help and support with that's challenging for you? That's the standard template. Everyone gets that. Then underneath, as a lead, you can add other things. Like sometimes you can ask people like higher level questions like, why do you value working at this company, and things like that. But all that data this is often a forgotten part of it, because we often look at, even when I spoke about, when you looked at the title of my talk, a lot of people will fall into the technical quality and what's the performance of the team in terms of efficiency, but then we often forget that the team health and culture is very important. In the reverse way, and that's why I put this at the end, I spoke about product value being the most important, because obviously you want to build something useful. This one is also super important because you can get all the other ones right, and you have the best engineering practices, you're building the best product and everything, but then every 3 months, people are leaving and joining your company because it's like such a toxic place to work. So you also want to really care and look at this and get that data in. All right, so in summary, similar to what I said at the start, there is no silver bullet of like, let's measure that. We're in trouble, we need to figure out how this engineering team is performing. Let's measure that one thing, and we know. You have to look at multiple layers and multiple different things, and all together as a whole, as a lead, when you look at everything, then you can gauge where you're at. And it's not surprising that in some aspects you might be strong at others, which probably is the sense some people have in the room. Is like, okay, we're really great at 3 there, but like there's one that like we've been like looking down on, or we're not even tracking at all, we didn't really care about. So it's important to then focus on those. And in summary, like it's just after like doing all these sort of slides, there are a few things that came to mind that I would suggest if you're looking at like starting to get into like a bit more of this like measuring performance journey. One is make small changes and measure impact. If, for example, and I highly doubt this is the case, your team has been doing none of these things, don't go there on Monday and be like, right, we're going to introduce like all these things that I learned at the conference this week, and like we're going to get going, we're going to become the most performant team, because that's just going to be chaotic. And secondly, you probably find it very difficult to figure out which one is causing the positive moves and which one is even making things worse. So pick a few, make small changes and measure the impact, and then like you want to grow from there. This journey takes time, like to fix these performance issues and measure them. Focus on critical areas. So look at where you have the biggest problems. Sometimes it's okay to have one just being on autopilot. So maybe your technical quality is all right, so just keep it on autopilot. But then you've got a problem of churn at the company. People have been complaining and leaving. They're saying they're not growing and stuff. Then focus on that critical area, sort it out, measure it, then let it go into autopilot and go to the next most important one. It's important to understand different levels to use data. For an engineer, it's great to know how many deployments we're doing per week. Whereas for your company CEO, who's very high level and is non-technical, they just want to know generally how is this team performing. You can't then go there and say, well, okay, so our change fail rate is this, or our deployment time is this. You want to be able to communicate at different levels and use that data to inform you in the right way. Software is a team sport. So focus on the team and not individuals. It's very, very easy to especially when you start looking at those engineering, technical quality ones and everything, to really be like zoned in on an individual and say, well, your change fail rate is this and this. The one thing I would say is people having bad statistics as individual can be a sign of the systems not being correct or the team not gelling correctly as opposed to the individual not being great. The stats are there for individuals and they can point at something like if someone hasn't done a MR or pull request for like 3 weeks, of course there's something going on there that you want to dig deeper in. But when it comes to measuring the performance, you want to be looking at the team as much as you can and move the team and get the team going as opposed to targeting individuals. And then also you can use these to set targets and give teams a direction. So you can look at the Dora metrics, for example, and be like, okay, now we're tracking Dora metrics. Let's set a goal as a team that like we want this X number of deployments per month. Our change fail rate should get to this place. And then you let the teams figure out how to achieve that. You don't have to then go enforce the solutions. It's just more, how do we keep it at a lower rate? Because they know like maybe if they break it, then they figure out, oh, this is what's always causing it, then they start adjusting. So the targets are actually just a nice way to give a direction for teams to go. And then also remembering that both qualitative and quantitative measures are important because it's easy to just come out with a sheet and show someone a set of numbers and say, look, this is what it's showing. But then the qualitative stuff is also very important. Because you can highlight some other things, like maybe there's a manager or someone who's not that great personality-wise, and that's maybe difficult to track from a quantitative side. But then when you have a conversation with someone, they'll tell you like what's happened, and then you learn from there. Couple of books that have helped me in this journey. They don't cover everything like on all the performance measures I was talking about, but Accelerate was actually the people who did the Dora metrics research. And this book is a book that's been out for a couple of years now, which helps you learn about like building and scaling high-performing organizations and goes into the Dora metrics and the research they did and how to actually measure them and things like that. So I'd recommend this book. And I would also recommend, these are more product-oriented books by Marty Kagan, but they're a good way to figure out, thinking about whether the things you're building are actually valuable to customers, which is a question as engineers we should often always understand and ask, as opposed to someone just tells us we need to build this, but we're not sure why. And then also like techniques that I mentioned around like customer interviews and measuring NPS and things like that are spoken about here. They really want to make sure what you build is really what customers want. So I'd recommend or Accelerate and then Inspired and Empowered. That's all from my side. You can find me on these multiple range of platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, depending on what you use. I run quite a bit, so I'm actually often on Strava more than some of them. You can search for my name. If someone is a runner or anything, we can connect there. If it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. I also blog on mutakwa.com occasionally, and I just put the tech leadership there. Just as a reminder, if anyone is interested in these kind of topics, these are the discussions we have at the Tech Leadership Meetup. We have an in-person one every second month, and then obviously have the online one. So if you're interested in our community, you can join us, techleadership.co.za. And in the theme of performance, to basically live up to my own talk's values, I'll be asking for feedback on how the talk went, how you felt it was. You can scan that code if you don't already have the link from what's been going around. And in a similar way to how you automatically give your Uber driver the 5-star, you can feel free to do that for me. And questions. Sorry, I spoke a bit fast, but that tech check kind of took some time. Cool.
Okay, so what I'm often worried about is the fact that you create a metric and then the team starts gaming that metric to create a false sense of doing something great. So if you're measuring the number of PRs per week, guys are now putting like one-word PRs in it. Like, have you got any experience around how do you ensure that teams don't start to erode their good culture and good behavior to try and meet the metrics that some pen pusher wants you to meet?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The first one is that's why I'm very much more measuring team than individual, because when it's very individual based, then someone's like, okay, this is going to determine my performance and perhaps my salary and everything. So then people are really like pushing to game it. Then when it goes a little bit higher level to the team, then it's more like, okay, this is a tool that's supposed to help us as a team improve. So, and then the second part is what you do when people don't meet the metrics that you're measuring. If it's a punishment-based culture, where maybe some teams are getting rated higher and are spoken about higher, or end up getting rewarded more because of those metrics, then again you're pushing the wrong culture. So it's really about like the culture. This is, if the team understands, which is also important, understands why that metric is there and what it helps and what you're trying to achieve with it, then they can see it's a tool to enable them to become better. And you would hope that they move in the right direction. But for example, we are looking at the metrics. We're looking at them from a team perspective. We're looking at them from an engineering org perspective. But I know if my team doesn't meet them in a particular quarter or misses one of them, I'm not getting punished or anything like that. It's more a discussion. So my lead will probably come to me and say, what's been going on? What's causing maybe the cycle time to suddenly be like 90 hours as when your team was 24 hours before? And also when we get to retros, I'm also asking the question to my team, like, what's happening to us? Like, we used to like release much faster and we want to release much faster. So I think measure team, make sure the team understands the metric and what its value is when they're using it, and then people shouldn't be punished when they don't meet it. Yeah.
Hi, so I've got a question that's more about like team cultures. So what's your experience with actually having teams work better together? So us as a company, we've got in our squad, we've got 2 engineers in South Africa and 3 outside of SA, and they're actually in different countries. People have different cultures, and everybody can speak English, but that and coding is the only thing we really have in common. And you really want to like get people to work together as a team, and I think it's quite challenging for us. So what's your experience working with a diversified culture? Also, I would say different hierarchy engineers, but what you ultimately want is the team to work productively together. And obviously the company's not paying for flights to meet every quarter.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more tricky in a fully remote environment. It almost has to be explicit and intentional from the company and the team. I would say a lot of culture issues in a team can be about like trust and like psychological safety in the team, where people feel like if I make a mistake or if I ask a stupid question, everyone around here, how are they going to react and all that, which takes time to build. But I would also suggest we're also a fully remote company. As company's been fully remote from the onset. So some of the values have been built right from the start, like way before COVID and stuff. So explicit social setups in a remote environment are important. My team has a social call, a 1-hour social call every 2 weeks on a Tuesday afternoon. We jump on the call. We'll either decide whether we're just going to chat like random outside of work. Because the thing is, you're often only in the work zone and people are pressured and everything. So we chat about random topics, like very open, people just chat. Or we'll play like a social online game, and then it creates like a bit of more of a bond. And if you do that more frequently, and then also when I facilitate calls and stuff, like if I get on a call on a Monday morning, instead of like, okay, Monday, let's get to planning. Last week we did this, just ask people how's their weekend, what happened, anyone did anything interesting, and then suddenly there's a whole conversation about food or someone going skydiving or something. And slowly those things start to build like a culture where people know about each other a bit more, because we are different as humans, but we are similar in many ways. So yeah, I think it's just gradual. Someone needs to be intentional about gradually building these relationships, and then they start to transition into the workspace where we're like all driven to work well and work better together. Yeah. Cool. All right, I think one more. Yeah.
Hey, so in your experience with one-on-ones, what are the type of things to look out for? Like some team members are really easy to open up and talk, and some people, keep the information to themselves, and it's really difficult to actually reach out to them. Just if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Character-wise, like some people are just, again, it's a trust-based thing. So character-wise, some people will be quiet at the beginning. What I've always tried to do is bring my own, like the true Tanaka to the one-on-one and be open with the person before they are open to me. So, like again, similar to what I was saying, like how was your weekend and everything, like how was your week? And then I'll talk about my week. What were the struggles in my week or whatever, and what were the very positive things? And then hopefully, like you start nudging the person to open up a bit more and talking with them. And I think everyone, like again, also always has things to say. They have interests, like learning about like the person and also understanding like what they value will allow you to sort of push the conversation and get a bit more. So again, it takes time. Every time when I start like leading a new team or a new team member joins, the first few weeks and so is really like a push on relationship building. We'll talk about work and stuff, but it's like, who are you? Where do you come from? And everything. And like usually once someone's settled down, I also like have a chat with them about understanding where they feel their career is at now, where they want it to be in like 2 years or so, and where they want it to be in 10 years, even if it's outside of software. Like, it just helps me to learn more about the person, but it also helps them to open up to you, and then things like that. And you said something to look out for, and I don't know if that's where you're going with the question, but something to also look out for in one-on-ones is when there's a change in the way someone's normally behaved. So if someone's generally like very talkative and open and tells you everything, then for the last 2 one-on-ones, they've just come in and they've just been like, one-word answers and everything, then you know something is up. Then you can now dig, is there a deeper issue? What's going on? Is there anything you need support and help with? Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you.